in general and friends of Tecumseh Forest, and welcome to the third in our fall speaker series. Thanks for coming out and for joining us and for your interest and curiosity and commitment to these issues. I see some familiar faces. There's those who have joined us for every talk, which is great. Some new faces, wonderful to have you. And it's exciting because this group, as I told folks last time, is a newer group, and the Facebook group started off about 2 or 3 years ago. Since we've had this series going, I think, Sonia, did you say we've had an increase in over 20 members just in the last few weeks, so that's wonderful. So I'm Jane MacArthur. Sorry, I should have introduced myself first. I'm Jane MacArthur. I'm a member of Friends of Tecumseh Forests, and happy to welcome you here and to be able to introduce our speaker tonight. Just want to let folks know, if you need to, you're welcome to come and go. Washrooms are on the other side of the building down the hall. If you haven't signed yourself or filled out a ballot, there is a raffle for a book at the back, so please feel free, and we will draw for the raffle at the end. And I'm going to start off with a land acknowledgement. I acknowledge that the land we are on is surrounded by water, originally inhabited by Indigenous peoples who've traveled this area since time immemorial. This territory is within the lands honored by the Wampum Treaties, who peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. The overall dedicated to learning more about our Indigenous history and culture in the region, and remaining committed to moving forward respectfully with all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people in so-called Canada. And of course, as we know, we're in the town of Tecumseh, which was named after Chief Tecumseh, who was a Shawnee war chief, and his efforts to preserve North American or Native American land and culture ultimately led to his death in the battle at the Thames in 1813. So tonight, as I said, this is the third of our 3 speakers in the series. We started off with Steve Colombo, who's at the back, who is the co-founder of the group, and he talked about the origins of the group. If you were not here for his talk, you can go to our Facebook page and watch that. The video is posted there. Our second talk was with Larry Cornelis on the importance of biodiversity and native species. Similarly, his talk is posted if you didn't get a chance to watch it, or if you want to watch these again. What a great thing to do on a cold night. Go back and refresh your knowledge on these subjects. And tonight, we are honored to have Laura Foy. And Laura, I will tell you that you are such an inspiration to me with your efforts at the Facebook group. When I started to work on my own native plants and naturalization areas in my yard a few years ago, I relied on Laura as someone who I knew had a good reputation from her experience. So just thank you for all that you've done, and for the work you continue to do. I want to read a little bio about Laura before we ask her to speak. So as you can guess from what I just said, and probably many of you know this, Laura is creator of the Facebook group, the Windsor Essex Native Plant Gardening Group. She has a biology degree from the University of Guelph and has been championing the cause of native plants for 10 years. As an amateur naturalist, her interests lie in birds, plants, and moths, and she works at Lee Valley Tools in Windsor. And I know that the last talk, Larry Cornelis spoke so enthusiastically about your work, and that he is bringing students there to show him what you've done, so we're all very excited to hear from you tonight on native plants and naturalization. And the floor is yours, Laura. Thank you.
No pressure. Thanks everyone for coming. If you have questions at any point in the talk, feel free to throw a hand up and ask them. You don't have to hold your questions to the end. I like to sort of make a running dialogue when I do these. I don't like to talk at you the whole time. So I was invited by Sonia originally to talk about naturalization efforts that are ongoing in the municipalities. So you may have noticed if you live in Windsor, they stopped mowing certain parks, and they're doing a similar thing here in Tecumseh. And so the question was asked, how does that sort of compare? How does it stack up against native plants? And what is it bringing to the environment? So I want to start with just going over like the basics, because I never know sort of what the baseline is for groups that I am not familiar with. Since you're all kind of new here too, we'll go into sort of the basics. What are native plants? They're plants whose presence in an area is the result of natural evolution. So that means that things that have been growing here basically since the end of the last ice age. That's important because they're co-evolved to our local conditions, which includes things like the climate, our soils, our insects, and other plants and animals in the area. And I just want to give a few concrete examples of what coevolution looks like, what kind of relationships we're talking about. So coevolution can be anything from the timing that things are flying around, their range, distribution, habitat, or even mechanics. So my first example here is two of our native lobelias. So you can see sort of superficially that they're kind of similar. They have these tall flowering spikes. If you look closer at the flowers, they're similar in that they have 3 downturned petals and 2 upturned petals. But if you compare them more closely, you'll see like the great blue lobelia here on the right-hand side is a little bit shorter and chunkier versus the really delicate cardinal flower. And so when you see their main pollinators, the reasons for those sort of adaptations start to become more clear, because a favorite pollinator of the great blue lobelia is a bumblebee. So it uses those chunkier lower petals as a landing pad. And as you can see, as it's digging into the flower to get its nectar reward, the reproductive structures of the flower are rubbing it right on the back. So it's depositing pollen on its back for it to carry around to their flowers. Similarly, the structure of the cardinal flower on the other side doesn't need to support the weight of a bumblebee. So its lower petals aren't built the same way, but its reproductive organ does the same trick where it scratches the hummingbird on the head in the same way. So that's an example of coevolution. Here's another one. This is the Kirtland's warbler. Has anyone here seen a Kirtland's warbler? Yeah, great, awesome. I have yet to see a Kirtland's warbler. It's on my wish list. They have a very restricted range, and they probably always have had a very restricted range because they're very tightly related to jack pine forests, but not just any jack pine forests. According to the American Bird Conservancy, they need dense young stands of jack pines that are 6 to 15 years old, 5 to 20 feet tall, and grow in very well-drained clay or sandy soils. And the kicker is that they don't even nest in the trees; they're ground nesters. So what is it about the jack pine forests that draws the Kirtland's warbler? It's thought that it's the understory. So when you look at a young jack pine forest, they have these dense understories, and they've got like sedges and ferns for them to camouflage and hide their nests in. Whereas you look at a more mature jack pine stand, and the understory changes completely, so it's no longer suitable. So we lost our young jack pine stands because Smokey the Bear said, only you can prevent forest fires. And people took that to heart. So for the last 80 years, they've been suppressing natural forest fires, and the jack pine stands all matured, and there was no young successional forests coming in behind them. So therefore, the Kirtland's warblers were greater reduced as they went. They are slightly recovered now. They've been delisted from the endangered species list in the States, but they're still on the endangered species list here in Ontario. So what is naturalization? In biology, it's the concept that something is growing and reproducing freely without human intervention. I don't like the term naturalization, to be honest with you, because it often refers to the way non-native species behave. And it can include invasive species, like this Phragmites is naturalized. It's not an indicator of something that's necessarily good. So I don't like the term as it applies to plants. So what are naturalized areas in terms of municipal efforts? Naturalized areas are areas of landscape that are often formerly manicured turf grass that are allowed to function as natural habitat. And this is most commonly achieved through the cessation of mowing, seeding, planting, and reduced or no maintenance. So these are the areas that we're talking about. So who's doing it? The town of Tecumseh, which is why I'm here. Also the city of Windsor. This is at a local park where we walk our dog. Partington Park, they started doing it this year. But further abroad, they're doing it further in Ontario, Brampton, Thunder Bay. We've got Montreal and Edmonton on board, Portland, Seattle, New Orleans, Berlin, and even the King of England. He's a huge proponent of natural meadows. This is his personal property in England, but he also founded the concept of the coronation gardens on the occasion of the 60th Jubilee. They created 60 wildflower meadows across the UK. I want to talk about one high-profile naturalization project that they did in the UK. It was formerly called the Back Lawn at King's College, and it was first laid in 1772. So this particular lawn predated the American Revolution, if you can believe it. And then, this is what it looked like. If you take a close look here, it's chained off, so you can't even walk on it. So whereas most people say like grass is good because kids can play on it, you can have a picnic on it. Not this one. This one was just for looking. There's even signs all around it in 4 different languages that say, please keep off the grass. So in 2019, they converted a third of it into wildflower garden. So here's what it looked like, again, a reminder, and then this is what it looked like afterwards. So not only did they convert it, they also made a path through it so you could now interact with the space on a personal level. And here's another angle of it. Beautiful. Yeah. So because it's a university, of course, they took the opportunity to do a nice study. So they set up 5 survey plots on both the meadow side and the lawn side, as well as a bat detector on either side. So they studied things like plant abundance and richness, soil nematodes, bats, climate change factors, and they also did a social survey. So I'll go over a few of the results here. This was after just the first year. The top row here is the lawn side, and the bottom is the meadow side. So at the end of the first year, they had only planted about like 37 species, but they found 84 plant species on the meadow side. That's an increase of 3.6 times over the lawn side. They found 16 invertebrate species, which sounds low, except when you compare it to the grass side, it was 3.7 times more invertebrate species. And I'm sure since then it's grown. The invertebrate biomass is what really shot up. It was 25 times greater on the meadow side, so just the sheer volume of insects on that side. The nematodes didn't change, no difference. They don't care what's happening. And then the bat species were recorded 3.1 times more frequently on the meadow side. They're hunting all that increased biomass. Yeah.
What is a nematode?
It's like a type of like worm in the ground, basically. Okay. Yeah. They're underground dwellers, so whatever was happening above ground obviously didn't affect them. So the social survey was really interesting. So they had responses from 278 people. Most of them were affiliated with the university in some way. 68% of people indicated that they preferred a mixture of lawn and meadow. 30% preferred entirely meadow, and only 1.4% wanted entirely lawn. And I just really want to have a conversation with those people. I don't get it. And 83.5% reported that meadows supported their mental well-being. Basically, it made them feel better to see that there. Lawn doesn't do that. It doesn't do that for me anyway. So the back lawn situation is an ideal scenario because, first of all, they have like on-staff groundskeepers who maintain it. They did soil testing ahead of time. They did full site preparation and removal of the plants that were already there. They came up with a custom seed mix based on historical information, and they also do selective weeding. And they have a disturbance system set up, basically. So once a year, every year, they hay the field. They have these quarter horses come, old style, and they hay the field manually. So they don't even bring in the mowers. They do it old style. So what happens when you just stop mowing the grass? What is grass, first of all? So in North America, our lawns are made up of a few different species. You might have different species depending on where you are and when it was planted. It's these, basically these 4 groups at the top here, and then there's other weedy grasses like barnyard grass, bank grass, and all that stuff. None of them are native. Not even the Kentucky bluegrass, despite its name, is not native. And then we often refer to lawns as monocultures, but if you've ever tried to maintain your lawn as just a monoculture, you'll know that it's almost impossible, and you'll have all all these guys. This is just a selection of common lawn weeds. Again, none of which are native. So you've got this here is the creeping Charlie, which is almost impossible to go even if you've ever had the misfortune. You've got your plantain, for instance, it's your purple dead nettle, or your spurge, just a selection of different non-native things. And those, we subject our lawns to frequent mowing, fertilizer applications, herbicides, and pesticides. And all those conditions do is favor species with its prostrate growth, so like short and spready, and fast regrowth ability. So if you've ever like mowed your lawn and then the next week there's like a little 1-inch tall dandelion growing, that's what we're talking about. They can grow back quickly and thrive in that condition, which is unsuitable for most of our grassland and prairie species here in North America. So what are some of the studies saying? This study here is a meta-analysis, so they looked at a bunch of different studies and pooled the results, and they found that increased mowing pressure results in decreased overall insect abundance and richness, so fewer insects and fewer types of insects, except for increased presence of pest beetle species, which are basically collectively referred to as grubs. I'm sure you've seen these in your lawn and gardens. This study here out of the UK evaluated, what they did was they approached prison yards basically to stop mowing in different plots, and they recruited the prisoners to be their survey takers. So what they found was they mowed the different sites at 2-week, 4-week, 6-week, and 12-week intervals. The pollinator abundance, similarly to the back lawn, increased by 170% in as short as 6 weeks of mowing, or not mowing. And floral cover and diversity increased at 12 weeks. So it doesn't take very long for nature to come back in these places. This was a study out of Florida. They evaluated floral resources and butterfly abundance on roadside verges, which is a popular area for municipalities to stop mowing because of safety reasons and money-saving reasons. So they found that the 3-week mowing schedule, which is their typical mowing schedule, showed decreases in all metrics. So the typical mowing schedule is not supporting much nature, but they also found that when it got to 6 weeks versus the no mowed pattern, there wasn't a statistically significant difference. So basically that indicates that is, again, 6 weeks, you start seeing these increased results. Some other metrics, Cornell University stopped mowing some of their grasses. They reduced their mowing schedule from 25 times per season to 1 time per season. I don't know anybody that mows their grass 25 times per season.
Oh, I do.
Yes. Are they just not mowing and they're letting whatever wants to hold, or they're not reseeding anything?
Nothing, yeah, just stop mowing. Basically what the municipalities are doing. And then they calculated a savings of 310 kilograms of carbon dioxide emissions from their mowing equipment, a savings of that per hectare, mind you. The city of Windsor was quoted as saying that when they stopped mowing these 22 parks, it was primarily driven by budgetary constraints, and they're saving $465,000 per year just by not mowing those 22 parks.
Well, I had a question about some of the studies that you were referring to before. You talked about how a lot of all new plants came back. They do as they how many of those were native and how many were invasive?
They did. I didn't get into all the nitty-gritty of it, but I'm going to get into a little bit more of that as we go. So just some generalized results. This way. Some of the trends that they found across all the studies. Floral abundance increased, floral diversity increased, pollinator abundance and invertebrate diversity also increased. Carbon emissions dropped, cost of maintenance dropped, soil temperature dropped, and carbon sequestration increased. So basically, the plants are taking more carbon out of the air as they're allowed to grow. So there's a lot of pros to be had when it comes to just letting the grass grow, but, it's a big but. Up to 90% of all insect herbivores can only successfully reproduce on plant species with which they have co-evolved. So the graphic here is butterflies in particular, but they're not the only plant herbivores. You've got all kinds of things that you may not even consider. Things like flies, shield bugs, plant hoppers, beetles, aphids, grasshoppers, and the list goes on and on. All these things need native plants, need the native plants that they have co-evolved with in order to continue reproducing. And onward up the food chain, up to 96% of all terrestrial birds in North America rear their young in part or in full entirely on insects, soft-bodied insects. So if you were here last week, Larry talked a little bit about the numbers of insects required by these birds to raise a brood. And so here's a couple other species that he didn't go over. Chickadees need between 6,000 and 9,000 caterpillars to raise just one clutch. And they are multi-clutch birds, so they'll do it multiple times a year. Warblers and wrens and sparrows and thrushes and on and on. There's basically a direct line that you can draw between native plants to bird populations. And it goes right through caterpillars usually. So what's the difference, Michelle, between naturalized areas, as you see from just letting the grass grow, and native planted areas? So I'll go over a few of the studies in this area as well and what they've shown. Native plants, gardens, this is a Canadian study from 2015. They found that gardens landscaped with a higher proportion of native species were visited on average 20% more frequently by pollinator species. This study actually was really interesting because they had such a hard time actually teasing out the effect because there's so many variables between like flight period of pollinators and the host plants and things that have specific pollinator plant needs, but that was their general conclusion. And then native plants versus non-native plants results in a Lepidoptera abundance of about 4 times more. Lepidoptera is all butterflies and moths. And their species richness, so the number of different species, is 3 times higher. And then when it comes to native plants and birds, every metric that they measured in this study, this was out of the Talamy lab, Doug Talamy, if you're familiar with him. Every metric that they measured, including abundance, species richness, and so on, there was a greater increase in the native areas versus the non-native. And there's a greater presence of species of conservation concern, which is really promising, and a greater abundance of insectivores. And those often go hand in hand because insectivore birds are taking the biggest hit with the loss of native plants and habitat. Mowing frequency is directly related to plant diversity. So the number of species can increase via natural succession, but it depends on the seed bank and nearby seed sources. So at Lakewood Park that Sonia and I visited, there's a naturalized area there that's adjacent to an area that was planted with native plants. So I expect that one will recruit a lot more native species more quickly than the other one that's sort of disjunct from that area. But both of those will probably do better than, say, one that's planted out front here, for instance, which is not near any native sources. So long-term studies do show that after 10 years, unmanaged lawns consist of between 5 to 30% native species, and they're generalist species. So you're not getting the depth of diversity that you would find in a native grassland, but there are some that recruit and survive. So in situations where they're doing active seeding and site prep, you've got as much as 70% native cover within 3 to 5 years. Now, whenever this happens in a municipality, the first concern and the loud and vocal concern is that there's going to be a huge increase in rats, ticks, and mosquitoes. So is that true? Is that founded? And the answer is, it's complicated. It depends. And there is no simple answer. So I'll break it down on a species like group by big group basis here. So mosquitoes are basically a non-starter. There's no correlation between vegetation height and mosquito breeding. they require standing water, so that's not something you find too much in meadow plantings. But they can complete their life cycle in as little as 10 days. So you're gonna find mosquitoes more around homes because of all the areas that can potentially hold water for 10 days. So if anybody says that there's more mosquitoes in naturalized areas, it's just not true. Rats. As far as rats go, the most commonly found rat in our area is the Norway or brown rat. And again, there's little research that indicates that vegetation height is linked with the presence of rats or other rodents. And Norway rats in particular are not native to North America, and they have no affiliation with our North American grasslands. So some stronger indicators of the presence of rats would be things like shelter, like in our homes and sheds and wood piles and whatnot, and food from human waste, animal feed, and fruiting trees. So in areas where there are big dumpsters with food and like near restaurants and things like that, and farms. Ticks is where it gets a little more complicated. I think if we're all sort of the outdoorsy types, which I assume we mostly are, nobody can deny that there's not been like a massive increase in tick prevalence in the last 20 years or so. And that's largely due to climate change. But ticks in general prefer humid, shady leaf litter areas and dense understory areas because they have very small bodies and they need to retain as much moisture as they can, and they get that from the air. Vegetation height, again, is not a good indicator for tick presence. So just because there's tall grass doesn't mean there's going to be ticks automatically. An indicator of where you might find more ticks would be the density of host species such as deer and rodents. So if you're not finding those rodents in those grasslands, and if you're not getting deer probably in Partington Park in South Windsor, for instance, there's probably going to be fewer ticks. So all in all, there's no real strong indicator that naturalized areas will result naturally in an increase in any of those three pest species. So what are some recommendations for municipalities if they want to go forward with this and try and put their best foot forward? Who recognizes this area? That's where we are right now. So site selection is an important one. Considering what the current land use is, underutilized parkland and non-recreational turf areas are going to be your good candidate spots. So this big grassy area out front here, I don't think they use it for anything. I think it's just mowed grass. So that's a perfect spot. So Sonia, that's your next one. Yeah, so areas like that, and that's what they chose the parkland, the parks in Windsor for that reason, because they're areas of the parks that aren't necessarily used. Back to our example where we live in Partington Park, there's like a schoolyard, a soccer field, and a playground, and then the rest of it is just grassy field that just gets mowed for nobody and no reason. So now it doesn't anymore. Some good candidates would be roadsides and utility areas and municipal buildings. Another consideration of site selection would be neighboring land uses. Residential areas can be tricky for the very reasons we mentioned because of all the pushback, but they're often prime candidates because that takes up most of the city. That's where the land is. Agricultural similarly can be tricky because you want to be very sensitive to farmers and their land uses. There's a lot of pushback through like there's the noxious weed list, which does have some native species on it, but you got to be really careful what you're going to let grow within those boundaries. Commercial areas, industrial, and municipal are all great candidates. So this part here, this is on Lanu, just behind like the McDonald's Plaza. This is Buster Rio Park. I'm not super familiar with it, but as you can see, there's some kind of soccer field here and a playground here, but again, similarly to Partington Park. Who's using this back here? Probably nobody.
Dogs.
Dogs. Yeah. And then the yard, this lot next to it, I'm not sure what this is. It's who owns it. This might not be the best spot just because of the restaurant and the plaza here. So the dumpster situation might be tricky. Site prep is always a important step that I think most municipalities skip because they're trying to do this as like a budgetary savings rather than a conservation route. So the removal of the existing vegetation is always an important first step, which usually gets skipped. It's important, avoiding tilling is usually the recommendation. So you've got limited options for how you're gonna remove that turf. And then seeding or planting appropriate species. So depending on what's already there, you're gonna look to target our native tallgrass prairies, which are full sun, or an oak savanna, which is like mixed prairie and trees, or woodland, depending if you have a lot of trees already. And then site maintenance. What the city of Windsor is doing is mowing a 2-meter strip on all sides of these areas to try and keep people and the prairie separated from each other for the reason of pests. Selective weed control is an important one. So when you start getting some aggressive non-native weeds like wild parsnip, if you don't take care of that, it's gonna spread and take over the whole site. So that's an important management tool. And then disturbance. The fire regimen would be the preferred prairie control technique in our region. But because of the location of a lot of these places, they really can't do that. They can't go burning Lakewood Park, even though I'd love to see it. So a combination of mowing, and even if they're feeling really brave, grazing. A lot of places are bringing in goats nowadays to control woody non-native species to help keep their prairies open. A combination of mowing and grazing or fire would be the best management. And then the court of public opinion is a big one. Education campaigns via signage, via signage and like local media coverage are important. Yeah.
You touched on this a few minutes earlier about how when people do projects, there is this pushback.
Yeah.
And I had a memory, it was back around 2010, near the Bell River Marina, they had an aquatic restoration project.
Okay.
This is waves lapping, the lake is never still.
Yeah.
And the first thing the local residents said, will it increase mosquitoes? So I had to laugh and think that public pushback isn't limited to terrestrial situations, it can be aquatic too.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of bad information out there. So public opinion, education is probably your best bet. It's gonna be hard to win over some people, but if you tell them and give them a heads up about what's going on and give them some of the data, so like some of the information that I've presented here tonight, that's a good starting point. Signage is important so that they realize that there's a project that's happening here and it's not just like somebody forgot to mow this section of the park. Planting and weeding events can be important too because it helps empower local people to take ownership over the site. When they've planted it themselves and they take care of it, that can go a long way towards an outreach. Monitoring so that you can say with assurance that, yeah, there are no ticks because we did a tick drag, we did a tick sweep and we didn't find any. That's a really good way of reassuring people. And citizen science, connecting people with, again, if they're not planting it or weeding it, they're still taking ownership of it by discovering what's there. So that is the end. These are some resources. These are the people of interest that I recommend following here. We've got Doug Tallamy, Lorraine Johnson, she's like the Canadian version of Doug Tallamy, if you will. Benjamin Vogt is a landscape architect in the States, so he does this for a living. He advocates a lot for ways to work with bylaw restrictions. And Heather Holm is a pollinator scientist in the States. Then you've got a few organizations on the other side. The Xerxes Society has a lot of really great resources and information. Homegrown National Park is Doug Tallamy Venture, where he advocates for people to grow wild on their own properties to help restore biodiversity across the landscape. Wild Ones has some plant designs that you can use. The Ecological Design Lab, that's out of the former Ryerson University, I think it's called Toronto Metropolitan University now. They are advocating for bylaw reform in a big way there. And then me, the Windsor Essex Native Plant Gardening Group up here.
We're open to ongoing questions. questions you can put
Yeah,
in?
absolutely.
Maybe I'll ask one.
Okay.
You said earlier in the talk that you didn't like the term naturalization,
Yeah.
and that you wanted to make that distinction between just letting things grow and
Yes.
putting native plants in. So, and that spoke to me specifically because I know I started out thinking, oh, I'm just not gonna bother this,
Yeah.
and see what happens. I wonder if you could share, like, what you think after research you've done, your own experience, what do you think is the most compelling thing you can tell people about why to go native? I mean, you've told us brilliantly in terms of like the scientific rationale and so forth, but taking into account this like the public opinion in the background. What do you think is the most compelling thing we can say to get people to embrace the need for
Yeah.
native plants?
It's really hard to distill down to like one little nugget of wisdom, but I think it would be basically like nature cannot continue to exist in enclosed like reserve areas. Nature exists across the landscape, and we need to give it back some space to allow it to thrive, because we take up so much space as humans, and our yards are taking up so much space, and that's a valuable resource, the land that we live on. So I would just say, you know, we need to give a little back and give nature room to thrive.
Thank you.
I wonder if you had looked at alleys at all as areas for more native planting. I just, you know, we live in an area, an older area, where there are lots of alleys that are never gonna close
Yeah.
because of services. And there's things growing in there, and people get orders all the time to cut back.
Yeah.
So, are there things we can do you think, in alleys to create these, like, more corridors?
Yeah, I mean, it would take like ownership of the homeowners basically, because that is their property essentially, and adjacent to their properties. It can be a little tricky just because of like close confines in a lot of them, and then for, like you said, services, like a lot of them used to do trash pickup back there, although I think they phased that out now. Yeah, so now it's just a matter of being able to drive a car down it, basically, access. So as long as you could manage it without like spillover, basically, you know, sightlines and encroachment, I think it could definitely be encouraged. It would be a great spot to make a pollinator corridors to connect. Does that answer your question? Yeah? Yes.
Just to piggyback that, I live in Walkerville, Windsor, and our alleys are grassed, and we've gone, the people who have planted in the alley, including myself, you just go out and you make sure that there's enough room for like the big trucks that
Yeah.
come and walk off your tree branches and whatever to go down.
Yeah.
And nobody has said anything
Yeah.
so far.
Yeah, well, that's the trick of it, right? It's because our bylaw enforcement is complaint driven, so as long as nobody says anything and it just scoots under the radar of anybody in the administration, you're great, you're golden.
But it's interesting though, because a lot of like people walk our alleys because they're grass and they take their dogs out.
Yeah.
And people will actually stop and talk to me and be like, oh my gosh, this is so beautiful, like,
Yeah.
you know, kind of thing. So there's a lot of positive, but when I started doing it, another neighbor started doing it, it was kind of humorous because we were out there going, okay, so, and the big wheels go down here in the middle.
Yeah.
And then we just did it,
Yeah, good for you. Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
I say
it's,
that now when you watch tomorrow's movie.
Yeah.
It's like, don't say anything.
Yeah,
Nobody
don't tell
knows me.
anybody, yeah. Yeah, that's, it is a good point of community building, basically. Like, we did ours in our front yard, for two reasons, for community building, but also because our dogs tear up the backyard. So, I did it originally with outreach in mind, and when we were originally planting, especially down closer to the road, it was sort of during the pandemic when everybody was walking around, because that was all you could do. And we had so many people stopping and saying, oh my God, this is gonna be great, and then on, and then as soon as it sort of hit its peak, everyone was like, this is not great. And that's when we started to get pushback, because it just didn't look like what most people imagined and envisioned from a garden. Yes?
What would you recommend for people that have like super small properties that maybe don't have like a ton of space for a ton of plants?
you don't need a ton of plants. Just pick like a few really like keystone powerhouse pollinator species and go for it. You can even do it in container gardens. Like you don't even need to have ground to put the plants in. Yeah, so there's lists for native species available online for stuff that will grow in containers in small spaces. So you might want to limit yourself to like shorter growing stuff. For sure, yeah.
I was just gonna say, piggybacking what this lady said, my wife's done the Wheatley Horticulture Study, and she laid out our front yard, it's a fairly big front yard, it's down by the lake in Wheatley, and with all native grasses and it's all naturalized area, and it looks very purposeful, it looks, with the grass paths, it looks supposed. We had somebody called bylaw on us about it.
Which turned out okay, actually, so, so a couple of things about that is that when I did lay it out and I chose the areas, I did it very purposely with design, right? So I think that that design can manage the perception of the aesthetics of the area to read as kind of acceptable, because if something looks good, whether it's natural or ornamental, it's a little bit more readable, and so people feel more comfortable with it. But also, you know, because we're in Wheatley, we're in Chatham-Kent, and so, you know, Joel did the research on it, and so Chatham-Kent does have, you know, a low height restriction, but then they also did an amendment to that in 2021 so that they do allow naturalized areas on residential properties. And so we were well within that, and so I was happy to see all of the CWF paperwork tonight, because we did get the naturalized habitat sign from CWF, and so we have that up the street now.
And to your point, it's funny, if you walk down our street, during the evening or in the morning, it's dead quiet. As soon as you get to our yard, all you can hear is bugs.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with Melissa Gagnon in Wheatley? Yeah, their story is very inspiring. I personally found her inspiring because I have no front lawn and very little back lawn, like just a path to the bird bath. And they took farmland, I think maybe 20 years ago now, and have converted it to flower gardens, but also naturalized areas. And if you follow her on Instagram, all you can hear are the birds.
Yeah.
And it's really
Yeah,
something.
her spot's beautiful.
It is beautiful. Like as soon as you go down to Langway, like you can just feel yourself go.
Yeah.
Like it's true though.
Who is that?
Melissa Gagnon.
And where is she?
I think
In
she's
Wheatley.
called, she's called Wildflower Farm, I think, isn't she?
No, she's Morning Dew Farm.
I know who that is.
Okay.
Yeah, Morning Dew Farm.
Yeah, yeah, there is a lot of links between, like naturalized areas and nature and mental well-being. And you do sort of relax into it when you get there. And I think there's just, people are so divorced from nature nowadays that they are like afraid, and there's like a lot of resistance to that, yeah.
Well, she has some of her neighboring farmers who have now taken part of their land just from watching her and made it into a wild area. So like there's hope, like there's hope there.
Yes. Yeah, I see it all the time. There's municipalities are changing bylaws all over the place. Even Windsor, which is still not ideal, is better than it used to be.
Yeah.
And yeah, when we originally put our garden in, and we did the same thing. We put in like a gravel strip at the front to keep plants and people separate. We had a cedar split rail fence. We had the sign. We did the whole thing. We did the flagstone pathway. And then when they couldn't get any traction in complaining about our plants, they put in a complaint about the right-of-way encroachment. So we had to take out all that stuff. So it used to look a lot nicer from the road because there was like these beautiful like cedar split rail and flagstone. And now it's just plants all the way to the road, which I'm sure is not what they intended. But that's the way we went. Because I wasn't putting grass back in. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
In regards to civic science, I know that the difference maybe between education and civic science, like this is an educational moment. And I know that at Lakewood, they have plaques to say this area is being naturalized, so that people understand that this isn't just, you know, chaos, although it is kind of chaos in the greatest way possible. But are there other examples in Windsor-Essex County where there's more than just a plaque, like maybe there's a bit more information on like what might be growing here if something was seeded, what actually it's doing for the ecosystem and so forth? Like, do we have examples of that happening right now?
I know of a few that used to exist. I don't know if they still do. So, I think it's Kingsville at Lakeside Park,
Okay.
they did like a riparian, Erica did like a riparian planting there, and there was a
Okay.
sign, like a
Neat.
beautiful plaque sign, yeah.
Hi, I'd just like to pitch in. At the University of Windsor, there's the Stuart Moore Garden. I helped develop it. And one of the things, they invested money in a weatherproof outdoor plaque that maps out all the species and where they are.
Oh,
Great, yeah.
It's near the Letty Library.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I do wish the signage, especially in Windsor and Tecumseh the same way,
yeah.
they have this like little tiny sign that just says naturalized areas
Yeah.
with no further information.
I
I
think
wish
that it
it
would help
was,
with the public
yeah,
opinion
I
piece
agree.
perhaps too, right?
Absolutely,
Like,
more
people are-
information is
People
always,
are walking through there,
there's
checking
no such
things
thing
out.
as too much
I think so
information.
too.
Or the citizen science type stuff too. I love that I walk Ojibwe quite a bit. And there's 2 or 3 spots where they have the little phone
Yeah,
things put up. So
Camera
it's like, yeah,
posts,
take a
yeah.
take a picture of the area, there's an email address, you send it in,
Yeah.
and that way they can remote monitor
Yes,
throughout the year
yeah.
what's going on
I
in
love
that
that.
area.
Yeah, it's like a direct connection to science, right? Science and nature, yeah. Any other questions? No? All right, nope, nope.
Speaking in. So you're talking about naturalization and letting grass grow, which isn't native,
Right,
but has some benefits, which
Yes.
is what you told us, so that's better than
yeah.
mowed grass. If you wanted to introduce natives into a grassy area, I assume you can't just sow seed.
You
Are you-
can,
Will-
your
will that-
results are
that
not
was my
gonna be
question.
amazing. You can do that, but what you really need to do is disturb the thatch layer basically, because grass is so thatchy after a few years. You really need to like expose some soil to get those seeds to germinate, because otherwise if you're just throwing seed out into a pile of thatch, chances are some bird's just gonna come by and eat it.
And planting natives into the grass would be
Yeah, that would
a
help.
better way to go.
Yeah, that would definitely help, yeah. Get a leg up, starting from a full plant rather than a seed.
I just have a comment about naturalized areas, so I kind of have an issue with that, with just letting the grass grow. Because when you just let the grass grow, what comes in next are non-native invasives. You get Queen Anne's lace, chicory, you get all of those things, and they outcompete all the natives, so it's much preferable to get rid of the grass and do a proper planting of natives. And a really good example of that is Blue Heron, which is City of Windsor, but when it comes to use that area, it's just full of phragmites and just non-native. Everywhere you go, oh, isn't that a pretty flower? And you look it up, it's
Yeah.
non-native,
Yeah.
and it's kind of frustrating. And I know they're doing a really good job right now through field naturalists and using field naturalists to do to have a grant to work on the phragmites mitigation in that park.
Yeah, that park, I believe what they did there was they probably scooped out that pond and used the soil to cap the old landfill. So what's in that seed bank would be the Phragmites seeds, and so now you've got frag growing all up the hillsides too, not just in the water, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but it's greatly reduced because they sprayed it.
Yeah.
I was just at one of they've been doing every Saturday
Yeah.
through the month of November, Amy's going and getting crews to go out there, and it's very satisfying to cut phragmites. You get those canes and it's gone. But also, you learn that the process is a multi-year process to get rid of it, and it's very labor intensive, and not even, it'll come back if you don't
Yeah.
keep at it.
It's an insidious one for sure.
And it's just, it's sort of something that frustrates me when there's signs for naturalized areas and municipalities say, are we doing a great thing by doing a naturalized
Yeah.
area? It's like, well, it's better than the mowed grass, but you don't have biodiversity, you don't have the native plants
Yeah.
supporting the native insects and birds and stuff. And so native planting is much better than naturalization, and it's important to distinguish between the two because there's such a huge difference in how effective they are.
Yeah, and at some point, one of the bylaw officers told me like my garden was designated as naturalized, and I said, it's not. It's not naturalized, it's planted, it's a garden. And a lot of bylaws are going in that way, and they're making separate bylaws for native plants, and they're treating them differently than other plants, when it's just landscaping. It just looks different to what people are used to, so, like, othering native plants isn't helping anything.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Lorraine Johnson made a similar complaint,
yes.
because the city of Toronto has the same problem, and I'm not gonna use her words, I can only talk the way I talk, but they're sort of ghettoizing native plants through their own legislation.
Yeah,
And so we can never be mainstream because we've been put in this little box.
yeah, there's a lot of challenges, and like I said, the Ecological Design Lab has a really great, toolkit for helping citizens reach out to their various municipalities and try and engage in bylaw reform, using effective language, basically, that doesn't separate, native gardens from other landscaping.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention one little idea that almost happened by accident, actually, in my front yard in Kingsville. My front yard is not a restoration project, I should say. It's just a very messy front yard by most people's standards, and I don't feel I should maintain my front yard in a way to please other people. I do restoration elsewhere. My front yard is just very messy for a lot of reasons. But 4 years ago, we planted an irregular hedge of native juniper, eastern red cedar, that we actually rescued from the Highway 3 widening.
Yeah.
And in a couple of years, they were close enough, in a couple of years, it's pretty much a closed hedge. And it's not right at the road, but it's near the road.
Yeah.
What I'm getting at is you can't really see through it, okay? So before that, I got actual bylaw complaints because there were tree branches that we cut down and we didn't quickly clean them up and make it look neat again and so on. But now, if you're driving by, you don't notice what's going on behind the cedars, and it's a native plant. Within 2 years, birds are nesting in those young junipers, and so we still mow the grass in front of that enough times that it doesn't, attract unwanted attention, but behind it, we can pretty much do what we want.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, unfortunately, in our case, the right-of-way comes up 3 feet into our yard. It's like halfway through our yard. So we don't really want to cut off the garden at that point, so we've just conformed to the height restrictions within that section, and yeah, we're just keeping it, we're out there. Yes?
You've mentioned plants and seeds. Where do you get those around here, and how do you learn about them to know which ones go in shade and things of that sort?
Yeah, it's a steep learning curve for sure. IRCA used to have a resource that I created when I worked for them. It was Native Plants of Windsor, Essex. It's like a PDF that you can download from their website. I don't know if it's still there. It's like a little booklet with some of the most readily available ones. So we do have a few native plant growers in the region. Miss Teresa Net here. As well as Vic and Darlene, they own Native Trees and Plants. And they supply the Loblaws garden centers every spring, so sort of around Mother's Day, there'll be a selection of native plants in the garden centers that you can get.
And that company is just called Native Trees and
Native
Plants?
Trees and Plants, yeah.
Okay.
No hiding what that one is.
I was just at the library today, Essex County Library, if you have a library card, you can get, right now, they're running out, but you can get seeds for free. They're available right now.
And also, if you join my Facebook group, there's a lot of seed sharing that happens there. There's a seed exchange usually that happens once in the spring. And then, just message me and you can come pick some seeds out of my garden if you want.
There's plant sales too. The city of Windsor has a plant sale in the spring that I know, so I volunteer for Prince Rupert Day Early and are working out Ojibwe. We do demonstration gardening run, and we spend fall seed collecting. And a lot of those seeds go to City of Windsor for propagation. They're going right now for cold propagation. And they're going to plant them in the beginning of February. And some of those plants are going to be for sale. I think Earth Day at Malvern Park. It's a city sale, but there are often native plants available in the city.
And Vic and Darlene are usually there with Native Trees and Plants.
Yeah, I do better with plants. I've tried seeds.
Yeah.
I got some from Russ Jones, and I'm just like, well, that didn't do anything.
You could winter sow them.
Oh, you have to winter sow.
Yeah.
The winter sowing.
See, I don't know.
So it's really easy.
That's part of that learning curve.
You take
So,
a
yeah.
juice jug and you put a hole in the bottom, you put soil in, and you put the seeds in. You put the lid back on except the cap, then you set that jug out in the rain, in the snow, and,
And in the spring you have.
It has the highest germination rate of any propagation method.
Gotcha.
Just
Is that
because of
just
the
like
way-
the energy conservation of the seed and stuff? Is that why you have to do it that way?
with a native plant, you need to, winter stratify, right? So,
Yeah.
so it's great, because if you, like, so, can I do a shameless plug here? So my Rotary Club at Art in the Park in the spring, in June, we have all kinds of winter sown seedlings that last year, I think we had 80 containers of seeds that we put in, all native, and plus seeds. But right now, you can, like my daughter and I are harvesting our seeds in our yard, and then we're gonna put them in seed balls. It's another way to put stuff out into a meadow, yeah. But also winter sowing. And, so if you get some seeds from the library, then just get yourself a big juice container, and, you put soil in it, and then you just make sure every once in a while, because our winters are so erratic in terms of how much moisture we get, if you make sure that they get some water in there every once in a while, make sure they don't dry out. Then in the spring, you'll have, like, my daughter picked apart like 500 baby plants.
I had so many plants from the free seeds from the library, I didn't know what to do with them. I directly put some in my garden, I didn't have enough pots for all of them, I had so many plants, it was crazy, and it was the easiest thing.
Yeah.
It probably took me 20
Most
minutes.
most of our native plants, their seeds require a period of cold stratification, so it basically mimics winter. And so you can do that by putting them in your fridge or your freezer. You can do that by leaving them outside in jugs, moist jugs.
You can plant them now, though, right?
Yeah, you can put them also just in your garden directly at this time of year. If you try and do it in the spring, you're not gonna be as successful.
Another thing is that I'm fairly new to this, well, very new to this stuff too, and I didn't have great success with seeds, but one thing that has been great is that I have found people who already have their gardens who wanna thin certain things out, and they'll dig out and they'll give you plants, and you start this whole exchange thing, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So talk to people who are already doing it.
Reach out to your community, which is.
All of Laura's Facebook page, people are advertising plant exchanges, plant sales all the time.
Thank you.
I work at Horticulture in a local garden center, and we're getting more into native plants, but like on a larger scale, like our suppliers, they don't often go for native plants because they can be difficult to grow in nursery stock in pots. But is there any plants that like you find could be something that are easier to grow in pots that we could better sell to people? Like we have your milkweeds, we have your liatris, a lot of like common ones that you see around. Are there any that like you would want to see?
Basically, like if you look at what Vic and Darlene sent to the garden center, that's a really good starting place because those are chosen specifically to be gardener friendly as like an intro level plant. So you're not getting anything that's like 8 feet tall and that spreads very readily. So you want to find things that are sort of less enthusiastic, we'll say. So one of my favorites that I always recommend as a good starting place is Virginia Mountain Mint, because it's short and compact and puts on a really nice show for a long time, and it just is like a pollinator powerhouse. Like if you ever want to watch pollinators, just sit and watch just watch your Virginia Mountain Mint. Am I the only one that does that?
In the summer, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's definitely like one of my top ones that I recommend as a beginner plant. Yeah.
On kind of the same vein, there's also, we've been seeing there's like a ton of new plants coming out called nativars.
Yeah.
And obviously there's not much of a difference between them and a cultivar, like it's very shady. But are there any that you might recommend that are closely related, still have an ecological benefit, but maybe won't naturalize an area like outside of what?
Yeah, so the general recommendation that's coming out of like Doug Tallamy's research is that anything that's like, if it's just like a dwarf variety of something, like a dwarf liatris, for instance, that's less harmful than say like a Diablo red 9-bark, for instance, because you're changing the whole chemistry of the plant at that point. So anything that's as close to the true wild type as possible would be less harmful generally speaking.
One last part. Do you think about bee lawns in terms of replacing a grassier area, like if you wanted, you know, because they talk about you don't want a wall carpeting with your grass, but you want little, area rugs.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about B-lines?
Not especially, and that question always comes up a lot, like, what's something I can replace my grass with that'll wear really well to foot traffic? Nothing. Sorry. Yeah, there just really isn't anything, and B-lawns are also not ideal for areas that you want to keep as like grassy as possible, because if you're walking in it barefoot,
And
you're
that was
you're-
or my dog's, because you talked about your dog, and I, it's just that this area, it's like, what do I do with that?
Yeah.
He loves to run, right? And
Yes. So what I would maybe lean towards instead would be like a sedge lawn instead. So not necessarily flowering, but still like native, so they can still be used by like herbivores, like the caterpillars and things, yeah. And some of them do tend to be a little more foot traffic resistant as well. Okay, let's wrap it there. If you have any questions, you can come back to me.
Well, thank you again, Laura. Appreciation. Thank you
Thanks
so
for having
much.
me, thanks for coming, everyone.
A few things that I want to mention before we break. Once again, we're going to be drawing for the raffle, so if you haven't put your name in, now's your opportunity really quick to do that. I want to actually, she's not going to like this, but a round of applause and thank you for Sonia Colombo. It was really inaugural speakers event. Steve, of course, as well, but Sonia does so much work without any front-facing energy. So thank you, Sonia, and thank you to all of you who have made this possible. I want to let you know that we will be planning events coming up, probably early spring. And if you have ideas about things you'd like to see the group do, please be in touch with us. We're happy to take suggestions. We're also hoping to plan a sort of social event maybe earlier in the year, maybe January, early February, so keep tabs on the group. We'd love to be out casually, and maybe we can figure out ways that each of us might want to contribute to the ongoing activities or events that the group might take on. And just want to remind folks that on the Facebook page, if you were unable to attend prior speaker events, or you want to share the events with friends, the videos are up there for viewing. And I think that's it. So we will draw for the raffle prize. Shane Peters.